All right, this is quite a stack of sources you sent me for today's deep dive. Looks like we're going to be tackling a really pivotal point in Harry's journey.
Yeah, this is a period where things really start to escalate.
Things get darker, Voldemort's power is growing, and Harry's having to confront these disturbing revelations about Voldemort's past. And this whole concept of Horcruxes, that's pretty heavy stuff to deal with.
It is. It is. I think what's really striking about this period is that it really lays the groundwork for this final confrontation that's going to be happening between Harry and Voldemort. You see so much tension start to rise here. You've got the Ministry in denial.
Yeah,
You've got ordinary wizards who are caught in the crossfire. And then you've got Harry who's being thrust into this really dangerous game of cat and mouse.
yeah, he's going up against an enemy that he doesn't even fully understand yet.
Right.
And it's not just Harry that's having to make these difficult choices. You've got Draco, who's caught up in this web of his own, forced to carry out this deadly mission for Voldemort. And then there's Snape,
Right.
making an unbreakable vow. And let's not forget about that mysterious potions book that's helping Harry excel in class. But at the same time, it's potentially leading him down a really dangerous path.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's very complex. What's interesting about the sources that you've pulled together for this deep dive is that they show this world that's teetering right on the edge of war.
Yeah,
Loyalties are being tested, and even some of the most powerful wizards in this world, they can't escape the consequences of their actions.
absolutely. So let's start with Voldemort's return. Now, the Ministry is still in denial, right? I mean, they're
Yes.
practically burying their heads in the sand while all of these dark forces are gathering strength.
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic example of what happens when you've got people in power who are so determined to cling to the status quo that they refuse to acknowledge a threat until it's right on their doorstep.
Yeah,
And that refusal, it has real world consequences. I mean, you can see it with the increase in Dementor attacks.
right.
You see all of these fake protective charms that are flooding the market, and it just becomes this breeding ground for fear and exploitation.
Absolutely. It's like they're creating this vacuum where darkness can just thrive. And we see that with Arthur Weasley, who's desperately trying to combat the spread of these fake charms.
Yeah.
Things like the sneakoscopes.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about a thankless job.
It is. But Arthur, I think, is a really good example of one of those everyday heroes that we see in this story. They're working behind the scenes, and they're tirelessly trying to protect others, even when the people in power are turning a blind eye.
Right.
I think it speaks to this resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of really overwhelming darkness.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that even in a world of magic, there are still people who choose to fight for what's right, no matter what the odds.
Exactly.
But while the Ministry is busy pretending that everything's fine, Dumbledore's taking a very different approach with Harry. It's like he's giving him this crash course in Voldemort 101. I
Yeah.
mean, he's really trying to prepare him for what's coming.
He is, and I think Dumbledore recognizes that this traditional textbook learning just isn't going to be enough to equip Harry for the challenges that he's going to be facing. He realizes that in order to defeat Voldemort, Harry has to understand him.
Right.
He has to delve into that darkness that actually shaped him. And that's really where those conceived lessons come into play.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating how Dumbledore shifts from teaching these spells and potions to showing Harry these incredibly personal and often disturbing memories of Voldemort's past. It's such a more investigative approach. It's almost like they're piecing together this psychological profile of the Dark Lord.
Yeah, and one of the most, I think, revealing memories that we get is the one of Dumbledore's first meeting with Tom Riddle at the orphanage.
Right.
You know, this isn't the all-powerful Voldemort that we see later on in the story. This is a young boy, but he's already displaying this really disturbing mix of magical talent and this chilling lack of empathy.
Yeah, it's really eerie how Riddle uses magic, even at such a young age, to control and intimidate others. Like that scene where he sets the wardrobe on fire,
Right.
or when he steals from the other children. It's chillin'.
It really is, and it foreshadows that cruelty and that disregard for human life that Voldemort will eventually become known for. And I think it also highlights his obsession with power, you know, that need to dominate everyone around him.
Yeah, and let's not forget about how obsessed he is with his parentage, how much he hates being associated with his muggle father. He even steals his uncle's wand
Right.
and frames him for the murders of his father's family, even as a teenager.
It's intense.
It's intense.
I think it reveals this really deep-seated self-loathing. You know, he's rejecting his own heritage, and it's fueling this desire to create a world where only pure-blood wizards have any power. And that rejection is so profound that he even sheds his given name,
Right. Tom Riddle.
Tom Riddle, and he becomes Lord Voldemort.
It's crazy. And Dumbledore even mentions, how as a boy, Voldemort seemed to be more bothered by the fact that he couldn't do magic outside of Hogwarts than by the fact that he was a wizard at all.
I know.
Imagine that.
It's like a warped perspective, right? Magic isn't this gift. It's not this source of wonder. It's a tool to control and dominate people. And I think that's a really important insight into the mind of Voldemort. It's this mind that sees power as the only real measure of worth.
Absolutely. But I think one of the most chilling revelations comes from that conversation between young Tom Riddle and Slughorn about Horcruxes. It's one thing to be power-hungry, but to actually delve into this dark magic to achieve immortality.
It's a whole other level.
It's a whole other level. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's a pivotal moment in the story, too, because it's where we're introduced to this concept of Horcruxes. This is dark magic. It involves splitting the soul, anchoring it to objects to achieve this twisted form of immortality.
Yeah. And poor Slughorn, he gets kind of drawn into this conversation with Riddle, almost against his better judgment. You can tell that he immediately regrets giving away information about something so dangerous and forbidden.
Oh, absolutely. I think his reaction really speaks volumes. He knows that he's crossed a line. He's potentially unleashed something truly terrible on the world, but the damage is done. Riddle, he's taken that seed, and the idea of Horcruxes has taken root in his mind, and it will become his ultimate obsession.
Yeah. And Dumbledore, being the brilliant wizard that he is, he puts the pieces together, right?
Right.
And theorizes that Voldemort has created multiple Horcruxes. It's a horrifying realization, and it just makes the task of defeating Voldemort seem almost impossible.
It really does. I mean, think about it. To defeat Voldemort, Harry has to track down and destroy these fragmented pieces of his soul.
Right.
Hidden who knows where. It's a monumental task, and one that is going to test Harry's courage, his resolve, and I think even his understanding of what it means to be human.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually brings out to another thread in this story, Draco Malfoy. We see this shift in him from this arrogant bully that we've come to know to this young man burdened by the dark secret. He's been given this deadly mission. What's going on there?
I think Draco's transformation is actually a really fascinating study in how even those who are raised in privilege and power can be corrupted by fear and desperation.
Yeah,
His family's allegiance to Voldemort has placed him in this impossible position. He's got to prove his loyalty through these increasingly dangerous tasks.
we see that with those secretive visits to Borgin and Burke's, those hushed conversations on the Hogwarts Express, that tense moment when Harry overhears him talking about a plan and, someone's going to get hurt. It's clear that Draco is in over his head, but he's also so determined to succeed no matter the cost.
Yeah, and I think it's a dangerous combination. You've got this ambition, but it's fueled by fear and this really desperate need to prove himself worthy. And it makes you wonder, how far is Draco really willing to go? Is he truly capable of doing the things that Voldemort is asking of him?
Well, Harry seems to think so. He's convinced that Draco's become a Death Eater. I mean, considering his family history, it's not that far-fetched.
It's not, but I think it's interesting that in this particular case, even Dumbledore seems a bit hesitant to believe that Draco's capable of that level of darkness.
Right.
It's one of the few instances where their judgment actually seems to differ.
Yeah. And then there's that scene where Snape makes an unbreakable vow with Bellatrix Lestrange. It's like watching this dark ritual unfold right before your eyes. What do you make of that vow? And what does it mean for Harry, who's still trying to figure out who he can trust?
Well, I think that vow raises the stakes considerably. It binds Snape to this mission. He's made a promise to protect Draco
Right.
and to ensure that whatever task Voldemort's given him succeeds. But the exact nature of that task, that remains a mystery.
Right.
And I think it leaves us and Harry wondering about Snape's true intentions.
Yeah, it's classic dramatic irony. We as the audience, we're in on this information,
We are.
but Harry's left in the dark, and it just fuels his suspicion and distrust of Snape even further.
Absolutely.
And then we have this mysterious potions book that Harry finds tucked away in Snape's old classroom, this Half-Blood Prince's book. It's full of all of these helpful tips and improved potion recipes,
Right.
but it's also got some pretty questionable spells in there. It's a
Right.
double-edged sword. It's helping Harry excel in class, but at the same time, it's kind of exposing him to this darker side of magic.
Yeah, it is. It's this really interesting juxtaposition, right? Because on one hand, this book is giving Harry a leg up. He's doing great in potions class. But on the other hand, it's introducing him to spells like Levicorpus, which, they seem harmless at first, but they could be used for really malicious purposes.
And Hermione, of course, picks up on that immediately.
Right.
She's suspicious from the start. She's worried about this unknown author, the influence that this book might be having on Harry, and she even compares the handwriting to Snape's at one point.
She's a good detective, but I think it really speaks to how sharp Hermione is and to her sense of caution. He recognizes that power, even when it's presented as a gift, can be really corrupting. And she's right to be concerned about the possible consequences of Harry embracing the teachings of this mysterious half-blood prince.
Yeah, it's almost like this book represents a crossroads for Harry, a choice between the light and the shadows.
Right.
And it's a theme that's going to continue to play out as the story unfolds. But before we jump into that, let's talk about Dumbledore's decision to go after one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. I mean, it's a pretty risky move, right? What leads them to that dangerous cave?
Well, Dumbledore believes that he's finally located one of the Horcruxes, and he asks Harry to help him retrieve it.
Right.
It's a dangerous mission, and there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding it. And I think it really highlights the lengths to which Dumbledore is willing to go to protect Harry and to defeat Voldemort.
This is where it gets really interesting. They face all of these challenges. Dumbledore's weakened state, the hidden cave, the creepy and fairy guarding the Horcrux. I mean, it's like something out of a nightmare.
It really is. The imagery that Rowling uses in that scene is so vivid, and it underscores the risk that they're taking.
And just when you think they've pulled it off, they discover that the Horcrux is a fake.
Right.
Someone has outmaneuvered Dumbledore, and it just throws everything into question.
It's such a blow, not just for Dumbledore, but for Harry, too. You know, they risked everything, endured so much, and they came up empty-handed, and it shows how cunning and ruthless Voldemort's followers can be. They're able to anticipate Dumbledore's moves and plant a false trail.
It's a crushing defeat, and I think it really sets the stage for the dark events that are about to unfold.
Oh, absolutely. And with Dumbledore and Harry weakened and vulnerable, they return to Hogwarts only to find a chilling sight awaiting them.
The Dark Mark.
Yeah.
Hovering over the astronomy tower, it's a beacon of danger, a symbol of Voldemort's power. And it really signals a turning point in this story, a descent into this chaos that's going to leave lasting scars on everyone involved.
It really is, and I think you can see it as the culmination of all of these simmering tensions, that escalating conflict that we've been talking about.
Right.
And it marks the beginning of a new chapter, this chapter where the lines between good and evil are going to become increasingly blurred, and the fight for survival is going to take on a whole new urgency. Yeah, that dark mark, it's a declaration of war, you know? It's like Voldemort saying, I'm here, and he's managed to actually breach the walls of Hogwarts.
And it's in the middle of all this chaos that we see Draco. He's acting on Voldemort's orders, trying to carry out his mission.
Oh.
He's managed to disable some of those protective charms around the school, and now Death Eaters can get the castle.
Right, and I think what you see here with Draco is this real internal struggle going on.
Yeah.
You know, he's caught between his upbringing. He's been raised to believe in Voldemort and to support him, but now he's been given this task, and it's just so huge. He's supposed to be this ruthless Death Eater, but he's still just a kid. He's facing this choice that's going to define the rest of his life.
Yeah, and we see this play out up on the astronomy tower. Dumbledore, he's weakened from that Horcrux hunt. He's been disarmed, and he's totally at Draco's mercy.
Right.
It's a super tense standoff, and you can just feel that weight of expectation crushing Draco.
You can, and he hesitates. He can't deliver that final blow.
Right.
I think it's a moment of profound uncertainty for him, you know? It's a glimpse of the real Draco, the boy who's underneath this mask of this Death Eater persona.
Right.
He's been taught to hate Dumbledore, to hate everything that he stands for.
Right.
But when he's actually confronted with taking a life, he just can't do it.
And then Snape shows up. He made that unbreakable vow to protect Draco and to make sure that his mission succeeds.
It's a chilling reminder about how powerful those vows are and what happens if you break them. Snape, he has to fulfill his promise no matter what, even if it means going against what he actually wants to do.
And he does the unthinkable. He kills Dumbledore.
Yeah, it's like this pivotal moment, this tragic turning point, and it sends shockwaves through the whole story. Dumbledore, he was a symbol of hope. He was the protector of Hogwarts. And now he's gone, and the whole wizarding world is just reeling from this loss. And it changes Harry's journey, too, you know?
Yeah.
His mentor, his guide is gone.
Yeah, and it's this brutal reminder that no one is invincible, not even the most powerful wizard. And Harry's left with so many questions and so much grief and anger.
Absolutely. The fallout from Dumbledore's death is massive. It's not just that the wizarding world lost a great leader. Harry's lost someone he really trusted, someone he looked up to. And he's got this huge responsibility now.
Yeah.
He knows he has to carry on Dumbledore's mission, but now he has to do it without his guidance.
And then there's that note, the one that R.A.B. left behind, the person who stole the real Horcrux and put a fake one in its place.
Right.
It's another mystery.
It is. It makes you think, who is this RIB? What part are they going to play in everything that's going to happen?
Right, right. Is there someone else working against Voldemort in secret? Are there other people who are going to come out of the woodwork and try to help?
It's like another layer to the story. Like, even in a world of magic and mystery, things are even more complicated than you might think.
Totally. And as everything's kind of sinking in after Dumbledore's death, Harry, he makes a vow too.
Yeah.
He vows to find and destroy those remaining Horcruxes, no matter what. It's like he's declaring war, he's promising to avenge Dumbledore's death and protect the wizarding world from Voldemort.
I think it's a turning point for Harry, too. It's like he's going from a student to a soldier.
Right.
He's not a boy living under this prophecy anymore. He's becoming a man, and he's taking control of his own future.
Yeah. And I think this also brings us back to that idea of the Half-Blood Prince's book. We know it's helped Harry in his classes, but it's also introduced him to some darker magic.
Right.
So what do these sources say about how the book plays a role in Harry's development?
I think the book becomes a symbol of Harry's struggle with himself.
Right.
On the one hand, it's this source of knowledge and power. It helps him be a better student and helps him face these challenges. But it's also a temptation. It could lead him down this darker path, just like it might have led its author.
And later on, we find out that the author of that book is Severus Snape.
Exactly. It just changes everything.
Yeah.
How we see Snape, his relationship with Harry, it all makes sense. All those notes and spells, suddenly you see them in a whole new light.
Makes you wonder if Snape was leaving those clues for Harry on purpose, trying to guide him in some way.
Yeah. Or maybe it was just Snape's past coming through, like a little glimpse of the darkness that he had embraced at one point.
And that's what's so fascinating about this whole story. It's like this unraveling of Snape's past and how he's connected to Harry and to Voldemort.
It is.
It makes us question everything we thought we knew about him.
Right.
What he wants, whose side he's really on.
And that's what's so brilliant about the way J.K. Rowling writes,
Yeah.
She creates these characters that are so complex and these storylines that weave together, and it keeps you guessing right up until the very end.
Totally. But before we get too deep into Snape's past, let's go back to this whole Horcrux thing. I mean, we know they're pieces of Voldemort's soul, but what does that actually mean? What kind of magic is this?
Well, Horcruxes go against the natural order of things.
Yeah.
They're like twisting the soul to get power and immortality. To make a Horcrux, you have to kill someone. It's this awful act that whips the soul apart.
Yeah.
And then a piece of that soul is put into an object, and that keeps the person alive even if their body's destroyed.
It's a messed up concept.
It is, and it shows how little Voldemort cares about human life. He'll do anything, no matter how terrible, to get what he wants.
And it also makes you think about what a soul is,
Right.
Like, if Voldemort split his soul up and put the pieces in these objects, is he even human anymore?
Right. Is there anything left of him?
It's a creepy thought. It's like Voldemort's not even a person anymore. He's just these broken pieces.
Yeah. And he wants to live forever. It's ironic, isn't it? He's trying to save himself, but he's actually destroyed what it means to be alive.
That's deep.
It is. And I think this brings us to what the whole story is really about, love versus power. Voldemort, he chose power. And in doing that, he lost his soul. He lost his humanity. But Harry, he's driven by love.
Yeah.
He loves his friends. He loves the wizarding world. He even loves his parents, even though he never met them.
Yeah.
It's like this classic battle, good versus evil.
Right.
But it makes you really think about what those words actually mean.
Absolutely. Voldemort represents that temptation of power, doing whatever it takes to get what you want. But Harry's life, his choices, they're proving that wrong.
Exactly. Harry's compassion, the way he sacrifices himself for other people, that's what makes him different from Voldemort. And maybe, just maybe, that's what will save everyone.
Yeah. The idea that love, something that people think of as weak, could be the answer to such powerful darkness, that gives me hope, even with all the sadness and loss.
It should, because even though things look bad, there's still that little bit of hope, and that hope's in Harry and his friends, their bravery, their loyalty, believing that good can win.
And we can't forget about Neville Longbottom. He really comes into his own in this book.
He does.
He stands up to Voldemort and the Death Eaters.
He does.
He destroys the last Horcrux. He becomes this symbol of resistance at Hogwarts.
Yeah. It's amazing how he changes. He goes from this shy, kind of clumsy student to this brave, strong guy who's ready to fight for what he believes in, even when it seems like everything's lost.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that heroes can be anyone, and even the quietest person can do amazing things when they need to.
Right. And speaking of heroes, let's not forget about Snape. His role in all of this is so complicated, and it's only now, in these later books, that we really understand what he sacrificed.
Yeah. We find out he was in love with Harry's mom, Lily. And when Voldemort killed her, it's like it fueled his hatred and this need to protect Harry.
Right.
Even though he couldn't show it. It's so sad.
It really is, and it makes everything he does make more sense. The way he treats Harry, pretending to be on Voldemort's side. It was all to keep Harry safe. It was all part of this big plan.
It's crazy. We thought Snake was the bad guy, but it turns out he's one of the biggest heroes in the whole story.
And that's what makes J.K. Rowling such an amazing writer. She created this character, Snape, who's got so many flaws and is hard to like sometimes, but deep down, he's driven by love and loyalty.
Yeah,
And I think Snape's story tells us that things aren't always what they seem.
right.
Real heroes, they have to make hard choices, choices that make them look bad to other people.
Yeah, and that's something that stays with you even after you finish the books.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what we were talking about before. Good and evil. It's not always easy to tell the difference. Good people can do bad things, and sometimes even bad people do good things.
It makes you think about your own choices, why you do things, how complicated people really are.
Exactly. And even in a world full of magic and amazing things, the hardest battles are the ones we fight inside ourselves.
So we've talked about these Horcruxes, pieces of Voldemort's soul tucked away so he can, live forever. But how do you actually destroy part of someone's soul? It just seems impossible.
It is incredibly difficult, and it should be. We're talking about some seriously dark magic here, the kind most wizards can't even wrap their heads around. Creating a Horcrux, it violates nature, corrupts the soul.
Yeah.
And to get rid of one, you need magic that's just as powerful and, honestly, often pretty dangerous.
So it's not just finding them, it's knowing how to destroy them, too. Sounds like Harry's got a tough road ahead.
He does, but as we said, Harry's never been one to back down from a challenge. And the good news is he's not alone. Ron and Hermione, they're both amazing wizards, resourceful, smart.
And they're fiercely loyal to Harry. They've faced so much together. It makes you wonder if that friendship, that bond, is actually one of Harry's biggest strengths.
It might be. Remember, Voldemort's biggest weakness. He can't understand love.
Right.
He thinks it makes you weak. But as Dumbledore said, love's a powerful kind of magic, maybe the most powerful kind.
It's like that line from the first book, there's no good and evil, only power and those too weak to seek it. Voldemort totally believes that, but Harry's whole life, his choices, are proving that wrong.
Absolutely. Harry's compassion, how he sacrifices himself for his friends, that's what makes him different from Voldemort. And that might be what saves everyone in the end.
It's a nice thought, isn't it? Love, something that people see as soft, could be the thing that beats such horrible darkness. Gives me hope, even with all the sadness and everything.
It should, because even when things are dark, there's always a little light. And that light is Harry, his friend, their courage, and that belief that good can win.
We can't forget Neville Longbottom. He really steps up in this book.
He does. It's remarkable.
Stands up to Voldemort and the Death Eaters.
Right there with Harry.
Destroys the last Horcrux. He becomes a symbol of, rebellion at Hogwarts.
Yeah, he goes from this shy kid, a little clumsy, to this brave young man fighting for what's right even when all hope seems lost. It shows you that everyone has that potential for good, even if they don't see it in themselves.
Yeah, heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and even the most ordinary person can rise to the occasion. Speaking of heroes, we have to talk about Snape. His whole story is so complicated, and it's only in these later books that we understand how much he gave up.
Right, it's heartbreaking.
We learn he loved Harry's mom, Lily, and when Voldemort killed her, it's like it fueled this need to protect Harry,
Right.
even though he couldn't show it. Such a sad story.
It really is, and it makes everything he did the way he was with Harry, pretending to be with Voldemort, so much more meaningful. He was working in secret, playing this dangerous game, all to keep Harry alive so Voldemort could be defeated.
It's a crazy twist. We thought he was the bad guy, but really he was one of the most heroic people in the whole series.
It just shows how brilliant J.K. Rowling is as a writer, you know. She created this character, Snape, who's so flawed, not always likable, but ultimately love and loyalty are what drove him. His story shows us that we can't judge a book by its cover. Sometimes being a hero means making tough choices, choices that make you look bad, even if your intentions are good.
It's a powerful message, and it stays with you even after you finish the books.
And it brings us back to that whole idea of good and evil. It's not always black and white. Good people do bad things, and even people who seem bad can do incredibly good things.
Yeah, it makes you think about your own life, the choices you make, why you do the things you do. People are complicated.
Exactly. And even in this world of magic and amazing creatures, the biggest battles are the ones we fight inside ourselves. As we wrap up this deep dive, it's important to remember that these books, while they're full of fantastic creatures, epic battles, and amazing magic, they're really about the power of love, friendship, and courage in the face of tough times.
Yeah.
They remind us that hope exists, even in the darkest moments, and that even the smallest acts of kindness and bravery can change the world. Maybe the most important thing they teach us is that we all have the potential to be heroes, to stand up for what's right, and to leave the world a little better than we found it.
Well, I'm feeling pretty inspired to go back and read the whole series again. Thanks for taking me through this deep dive. It's been amazing.
My pleasure. And remember, as Dumbledore said, happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light.